Good evening, everyone. I'm Arnie Eisen, the Chancellor of JTS, and I'm really pleased to welcome you all to this evening's Henry and Selma Rapaport Memorial Lecture. First order of business, our ritual together. Please, everyone, silence your cell phones. Some of you may be here for the first time, so I'm really pleased to welcome you to JTS and hope you'll be back soon. I also want to welcome all of the viewers on our live stream program tonight. It's wonderful that we're able to share this evening's program with you, no matter how far you are from the Upper West Side. We are excited that a number of synagogues are having a public screening of tonight's program. And I'd like to extend a special welcome to the members of Temple Beth Shalom in Brevard County, Florida, Beth Israel Congregation in Owings Mills, Maryland, Beth David Synagogue in Greensboro, North Carolina, and to all the other groups who are joining us. It's our great pleasure and honor to be joined by tonight's presenters, Mandy, Patinkin, and Kathryn, Grody, who will be in conversation with Ruth Messenger. Let me just say a few words of introduction, and then I'm going to turn the program over to Ruth. This annual lecture was originally endowed in 1982 by Mrs. Selma Rapaport, Zichronah Livracha, who was a past president of the Women's League for Conservative Judaism and a longtime member of the JTS board, in memory of her husband, Henry N. Rapaport. Henry was a distinguished attorney and deeply committed Jew. He served as president of Temple Israel Center in White Plains and later as president of the United Synagogue. He was an active member of the JTS board and a generous benefactor of JTS's scholarly programs. I'm pleased to recognize the presence this evening of Henry and Selma Rapaport's sons, Michael together with his wife Joanne, and David together with his wife Deborah, as well as other family members who are joining us. We thank the Rapaport family for their continuing and generous support. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Ruth Messenger. Ruth is JTS's inaugural Louis Finkelstein Institute Social Justice Fellow, charged with identifying and expanding the work of JTS for social justice. Ruth was most recently president of the American Jewish World Service from 1998 to 2016, is currently the HAWS Global Ambassador, engaging rabbis and interfaith leaders on behalf of oppressed and persecuted communities in support of human rights worldwide. She is also the social justice activist in residence at the Manhattan JCC. Before coming to HAWS, she had a 20-year career in public service in New York City as a city council member and Manhattan Borough president. And I can't finish this introduction without noting that Ruth's mom, Marjorie Weiler, was a longtime activist at the Jewish Theological Seminary. If you, like me, grew up listening to and watching the Eternal Light program, you owe a debt of gratitude to Ruth's mother, who made sure that that program came to life and was broadcast and reached so many people of such high quality. So we are all really thrilled, and Ruth is thrilled, right? To be back at JTS in these hallowed halls where her mother was actually instrumental to everything that happened. I think it's fair to say that Louis Finkelstein could not have functioned without Marjorie Weiler. And Louis Finkelstein did a lot of good for the Jewish Theological Seminary and many others as well. So we're all looking forward to tonight's program, which Ruth was instrumental in bringing to us. The program is called Art, Artists, and Activism, and I'm pleased to introduce Ruth, who's going to introduce Mandy and Kathryn. Ruth, Mandy.
Very much, Chancellor Eisen. Arnie did most of what I wanted to be sure you knew about my mom, but in case you think that the seminary's commitment to social justice is new, it is not. And on that back wall there are two framed ads from the original series of high holiday ads, which the seminary ran every year on the high holidays, speaking to contemporary issues and themes, and my mother had a lot to do with that as well. JTS is an institution that understands the importance of art and activism in our lives and in our Jewish communities. And it's increasingly bringing those elements into its work with future rabbis, cantors, educators, and undergraduates. Tonight, as part of that understanding and as part of our honoring the ways in which two particularly wonderful people combine their consummate artistry with a fierce belief in changing the world, I have the privilege of leading this discussion with two friends that I have been privileged to know, admire, watch on stage and screen, and travel with, Kathryn Grody and Mandy Patinkin. Before I go on, I want to say that there are photos on 4 different sheets out there, 3 of them from their recent trip with the International Rescue Committee to Uganda. Now, recent has lots of meanings, but Kathryn and Mandy got off a plane 2 days ago and they are still suffering jet lag. And there is also 1 page of pictures from the trip that I took with them to Cambodia to visit American Jewish World Service projects. What we're going to do this evening is I'm going to make a formal introduction of each of our guests. I'm then going to engage them in discussion, and before the end of the evening, there will be some time for audience questions. Kathryn Grody has performed for over 4 decades. She is an accomplished actor and writer. She's received Obie Awards for her performances in Top Girls and The Marriage of Betty and Boo, as well as a Drama Desk nomination for her performance in her fantastic 3-character, 1-woman, and highly autographical play, A Mom's Life, which some of you may have seen or read. All of those were produced at the Public Theater, an institution that we are all grateful to have thriving in New York City. Kathryn has also appeared on Broadway in Scapino, and this winter, maybe you saw it, she appeared off-Broadway in 20th Century Blues, which was such a personal story of women growing up in the last 30 or 40 years that I found it wonderful and painful at the same time. Kathryn's film appearances include Lemon Sisters with Diane Keaton and Carol Kane, and as many of you will remember, the wonderful movie Reds by Warren Beatty. Her television appearances include The Sunset Gang, Execution of Private Slovak with Martin Sheen, and of course, Law and Order Criminal Intent, because everybody in America is on Law and Order. And her written essays have appeared in Harper's Bazaar and Oprah magazine. We're going to talk lots more about activism later, but let me just note, Kathryn is a board member of NOR and of Dances for a Variable Population. As I mentioned, she's traveled with AJWS, with the IRC, with Search for Common Ground, and with a variety of other social justice organizations. Mandy is a performing artist whose vibrant career across the same 4 decades has spanned the worlds of music, theater, film, and television. From his breakout role as Che in Andrew Lloyd Webber's Evita, for which he won a Tony, to his 3-time Emmy Award-nominated work as Saul Berenson in Showtime's Homeland, Mandy has brought depth, commitment, soul, and wit. And just a side note, if you watched the episode of Homeland last night, you would have thought that it was actually written yesterday because of the nature of the presidential constitutional struggle that it was highlighting. Mandy was nominated for a Tony for his fantastic starring role as George in the Pulitzer Prize-winning musical Sunday in the Park with George. He's appeared in many feature films, including Yentl, Ragtime, and The Princess Bride. When you travel, yes, right. I learned this when you travel with Mandy. Half the people come up and say, "You're Saul Berenson," and the other half of the people come up and start quoting lines from The Princess Bride. Mandy won a television Emmy Award for his performance in Chicago Hope and starred in Criminal Minds. He has performed, as some of you know, in concerts worldwide. Drawing on his Jewish roots, Mandy invited the audiences to share his love for the rich tradition and possibilities of Yiddish music through his performance of folk songs and translated American classics in his widely hailed live show and record Mamalotion. And, now you have to sort of pay attention, Mandy has a new album coming out on April 27th. The album is called Diary, produced by None Such Records. And as Mandy says, since there are no record stores anymore, you can order it tonight. Mandy is a board member of the Arabi Institute. He's been closely involved with such organizations as, again, the IRC and American Jewish World Service, but also with the Brady Campaign and the Association to Benefit Children. Now, here's the most important news. Mandy and Kathryn have done this work over 4 decades. They've been married officially most of that time, since 1980. They've raised 2 wonderful sons, Isaac and Gideon. But most importantly, tonight is the 40th anniversary of their first date. And they were married in the chapel of the Jewish Theological Seminary. Now, why applause? Together, Mandy and Kathryn have worked in the defense of human rights, been resolute in drawing attention to the lives and needs of oppressed workers and of refugees, spoken passionately about the myriad ways that we as individuals and communities can get involved. And as I said, unlike some activists who are content to raise awareness from the comfort of their stages and living rooms, Mandy and Kathryn have traveled to communities around the world to hear people's stories firsthand and to build relationships that inspire them and that inspire the people they are helping. I've told Mandy and Kathryn that I'm going to ask some questions, and I absolutely am certain, because I know them, that I will not get down more than a third of this page of questions because I want them to take it away. But I wonder, just to start, if each of you would give us some sense of how you came to discover the artist in yourselves and the activist in yourselves. Was it something you were brought up with? Were you raised to be socially conscious? Did those dynamics emerge later in life? Whatever.
Leave it to Ruth to ask a really complex question, and I'm going to try and be succinct, which is not my strong suit. I was not raised to be an artist. I was raised to be a decent person by a father who landed on D-Day on Normandy, and really believed that the United States and the world would be great if everybody was sort of a participant citizen. So I was raised with the idea of, I don't think my father knew the term tikkun olam, but he practiced it, you know, so I was raised with that. And my mother loved a good story, so I got a lot of attention from telling good stories. And I did think that, you know, if you were growing up when I did, if you were female, you could be a mom, a nurse, a teacher, or an actor. So those options were, that seemed the most interesting.
My turn. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My life was spent at Congregation Rapaport. I believe Rabbi Ralph Simon came from this seminary. When I met Kathryn, she asked me, were my parents Republicans or Democrats?
Or socialists.
Or socialists. I said, I don't know. I thought they were just sisterhood and men's club. And there began the political education of Mandy Patinkin by my wife, Kathryn, Grody.
So one thing I'm interested in, and I understand what the roots were, and then you each became quite distinguished artists and performers. And what I'm wondering is, were there things you did in your performances or in your art that connected you more to issues of social justice? I mean, did you portray people who, you know, you then wanted to find the real person? So what were those connections? Because you are constantly connected. Oh, and we're all supposed to lean into our mics.
Well, you know, I can't imagine who I would have been without the 60s, frankly. I was accepted to a very big deal theater school when I graduated high school called Carnegie Tech. It was sort of the Yale of its time. And my parents shocked me by telling me for the first time that they couldn't afford something. And I made a very big stink and said, you're ruining my life, I'll never be an actor. I'll just go to New York. But you know, I was a good Jewish girl, I wanted to go to college. And I ended up at San Francisco State for the first year and then got a work-study fellowship for the next year. But I ended up at San Francisco State in 1964. And that was 64 and 68. It was the civil rights movement. It was Vietnam. And I went to college thinking that America was the most wonderful, perfect country in the world, and anything we did abroad was for the good of its people. And so I took it very personally when I discovered Vietnam, and I remember coming home my first break screaming about it, and my beloved father said, well, sweetheart, I don't know that I agree with you. And I, of course, said, a fascist, my own father. He said, don't scream and call me names, bring me the facts. And I had such a wonderful father that when I did, he was astounded in where he was getting his information, being a Jewish big brother, all sorts of things. And so that ended up informing me. And it was a San Francisco mind too, and there were a lot of theatrical events around civil rights and around protests. So they sort of dovetailed for me.
Well, Milman, you asked that question, I flashed back on a movie I was doing early on in my career called The Book of Daniel that Sidney Lumet was directing, written by E.L. Doctorow. And I couldn't connect or relate to it. I wasn't a red diaper baby. I didn't have parents that were red diaper babies. And I didn't understand how I would connect. And then Kathryn reached up to a bookshelf in our home, and she began to read the words of the children of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, and I was playing Julius Rosenberg. And she started to read these letters after I had previously talked to other people who were red diaper babies, but that didn't connect me to the work yet. She began, Kathryn, to read these letters from the children of this complicated situation, and she couldn't get through them. She fell apart. And it was at that moment that I understood how to play the part. I had never seen in my life people be so affected by political consequences and the course of people's lives. And my wife embodies that. And so it began my political, it continued to begin my political education with Kathryn, so much so that as time rolled on and various situations were going on in our lives as continued to go on today, and I had opportunities in concert careers or whatever, I would always do my concert like when Amendment 2 was happening, and people that had gay children would be, concerned that their child wouldn't have a place to live or be thrown out of school or not get the job they wanted or whatever the situation might be. And so we worked with the ACLU, and I would do a concert and I would entertain, and then the last minute and a half I would make a simple speech that said, if you don't have a gay child, son or daughter, I guarantee you in your lifetime you will have a relative or a grandchild that will be gay. And if you don't act now, they won't have a place to live or a job or a school to go to or basic human rights. And then I would put out a box. Actually, first I would take Joseph Papp's top hat. Because when Joe Papp died, Joe Papp signed our ketubah downstairs in the little room off the chapel. And when Joe passed away, I got his tallis and his top hat from his one-man show. And Joe taught us how to, as my mom would say, schnorr from the going out to raise money for the temple bazaars. But I remember Kathryn's previous boyfriend to me, also part of my political education, was a guy named Michael Ewell. I met him. When we started dating, all her boyfriends were at our wedding downstairs. And Michael was a Vietnam vet who started Citizen Soldier and blew the whistle on Agent Orange. So, week 2 of us dating, Kathryn brings me to an event that I think Michael was involved with, and we walk into a room where, atomic bombs are going off on TVs, etc. And Joe walks in the room and looks around at this apartment full of people and turns to us and says, there's no money in this room. And we stayed a few minutes and left. And so he taught me about fundraising at that moment. And after I would do these concerts for various events through our lives, and will continue to do, I'd put Joe's top hat on the stage and ask people, I know they paid a lot of money for the concert, but if you can give whatever you have. And then to, go a little more for Jewish guilt, I started bringing my young children with me to the concerts, and we would go out in the lobby afterwards. And with the ACLU as an example, we raised over $50,000 that published a book that was sent to every state in the Union. And so,
about how to fight that amendment.
About how to fight that amendment. So those are just a couple of examples.
Great. Kathryn, I want to come back to you on that same question, because both the play that you did this past year, 20th Century Blues, and It's a Mom's Life, were your efforts to take issues that you experienced as a woman of the time, as a mother, and move them onto the stage in a way that they could get some different resonance. So what was behind that?
Well, I did have the illusion sometimes, or the ideal notion, that theater was supposed to be this great provocative art form of bringing all sorts of different people together, talking about relevant things. And as most of you know, that isn't always the case. When I became a mother of 2, somebody actually asked me, are you working now or just staying home having fun? And I was sort of astonished by that question. And I went to my beloved mentor, Joe, and I told him that question. And I said, I would like to theatrically answer that. And he said to me, if you write it, I'll produce it. And I said, Joe, I need a place to write. I can't write at home. And Joe gave me a desk at the end of the hallway at the old public theater and a Selectrix. That's how long ago that was. I told Joe the idea when Gideon was 1, and it was up on its feet when he was 4. And I thought, why do we see all these World War II movies? Not everybody goes to war, but everybody passes through the bedroom and the kitchen. And what happens to us impacts us all our lives. And why isn't that interesting to talk about? I have found domestic life with my husband and children a Grecian. Blissful. I would say Grecian in its comic and dramatic aspects. And that's theatrical to me. So that was really important.
Blissfully Grecian.
And the play that I just worked on with my playwright friend Susan Miller, 45 years, women's friendships are really essential to their lives. And this showed the friendship over 40 years and what cements you and what can sort of break you apart in some ways. And that's another thing. How many battlefields have we seen of men going to war? And you can't ever see this rich context that is at the heart of a lot of women's lives. So yeah, both those plays spoke to that, which I was really happy about.
Can I just add one other thing that I thought of?
I
I remember from drama school, my mentor, Gerald Friedman, tried to teach me what an action was. And I talked to acting students sometimes, and even Stephen Sondheim, I'd been at his house and I would see scraps of paper, notes, etc., where he's got lists of words and he's working out the rhyme and he's trying to simplify that rhyme into a single word or 2 or 3. And my job as an actor and as a singer is to connect. That's the single most important word of my life, to connect. And the active aspect of that, and activism in general, is searching, that creative search for what it is in you that connects you to the fictional material you're doing, so that you're alive. Because oftentimes a writer will write something telling the story that the audience hears, but the actor isn't alive. And I believe that what makes us attracted to other human beings, whether they are performers or our wives or husbands or spouses or teachers or anyone we meet that we consider a star, is because of the light that comes out of them. And that is due to them connecting to the lives of other human beings. So when I was a kid playing in Evita, I had to find out what it was that Che, the character I was playing, was doing. And I found an active way to play the part, which was simply, I was a pointer in a classroom. You remember the old pointers with the rubber tips that the teacher would put on the blackboard? And my job was to say to the audience, keep your eye on the bouncing lady, because there but for the grace of God go you and I. And so that's how acting and activism to me connect me to the human condition.
Wow. As you've done this, and as these roles, as the two of you, each in your own way, and sometimes together, have combined these roles of art and activism, I wonder if you could speak to the notion, I don't want to be pejorative about this, but that is there a moral obligation, I'll do it as a word, for people who can command a stage, who can reach an audience, to speak to the issues of our time? And can you think of other people who were your role models, or did you often feel, certainly your story about working on behalf of women, like, what's the matter? Am I the only person who's thought about trying to bring these issues to the stage and move an audience? Because I don't know if I speak for the audience or not, but I would say I see too much performing, some of it good performing, but seems totally removed from the actual issues on the stage and far removed from the issues of our time. And you're different.
Oh, I have to go first on that one.
You will always be going first. Well, I screwed up last night. We had a friend over for dinner, and I talked too much. So I am not going to screw up tonight.
How do you tell me not to talk about that?
I needed to make that clear.
You know, look, I've admired from, Marion. Who's the great Marion that sang when Anderson, okay? Those people, to me, were... I had this notion when I was very young that the greatest artists had to be the greatest human beings. Okay, that turned out not to always be the case. But for me, the artists that I am moved by most are the ones that do take that ability to communicate, and as Mandy said, connect beyond their own pleasure in the craft, you know? And honestly, these journeys where we go to these different places, when Mandy talks about connecting, it's not just us connecting, but people connect to us. We get more than we give in these places. I mean, my life has been profoundly enriched. It's really sort of selfish to go on these journeys because my life is profoundly enriched by what I learn and what I'm given and the generosity of people who have materially often so little, but give me emotionally and personally so much in that area of connection, you know. And I do admire the people like Reds, you know, that's one of the great movies. Warren Beatty was one of those people that really cared. I think Bullsworth is one of the great political movies of all time. And so the people for me that were the combination of artists and saw how that art informed people were always the most impressive.
I'm sitting next to two of the most impressive women I know, and if I can just share a little Ruth story with you. We went to Cambodia with American Jewish World Service, and anyone out there listening, if you don't know about American Jewish World Service, find out about it. And if you have any way possible to go on a trip with them, do it. It will change your life. So we are in Cambodia with Ruth. It's before we go anywhere, and the very first stop was the killing fields. And then that's my mom. And then the Genocide Museum. But she said something to us that echoes to homeland as well. And I'll say what she said. She cautioned us because there was a group of people, we were all from very different walks of life, a variety of expertise was in the room. And she cautioned us to not feel obligated to offer suggestions or try to fix the situation, but to listen. To respect the fact that we've come so far to sit with these folks who are their grantees and to listen to them. And when Homeland became successful, I remember thinking, as the first scripts came in for the first year, oh my God, this thing is so good, before anybody saw any of it, before it aired, and we were getting script after script, I said, I'm certain it's going to tank. Because I had not seen anything other than Sopranos that had this quality to me. And then it became a moment where when the public met the woman called Homeland that I was having an affair with, they fell in love, you know, just like when you meet the woman you love, and then you bring that woman home to meet your family. When they react the same way you do, you have a sigh of relief. But then the success of the show started to make me happy, but also wonder, what was it that people were responding to? And one reporter said a word that I thought was most interesting. He said he thought it was a success because of its ambiguity and the nature of ambiguity in almost every situation. But then I realized that I thought from doing the show that for me it was a piece about family. It was a piece about, and that's another way that I connected as an actor. It was the Grody family relationship. It was the Saul Kerry family relationship. It was the relationship of family of the CIA family, the family of the United States of America and its citizens, and the global family of humanity at large. And what hit me, and what I think I've always continued to look for, is not what's on the line, but what's in between the spaces of the lines. And what I feel the show's greatest gift is, when it's working at its best, is demonstrating a cancer that has taken over the globe, which I define as the lost art of listening. And so, whatever that means.
And also, Ruth, I just realized, just to expand a little bit, you know, this 60s thing of, I always was frightened, like, what if I'd gone to that theater school, who would I be? Because Joe Papp, you know, Joe Papp was this idol that I ended up meeting right at the beginning, and he did the most political theater in the world. You know, he saw that connection between artists. I was with Joe, Mandy and I were both with Joe when he handcuffed himself to the Morosco Theater before they tore it down, you know.
Yeah. We were there for 24 hours reading every Pulitzer Prize winning play that was ever done there.
Right, so, yeah.
Okay, so the flip side of that question, and then we'll get on to something more about your trips, but have you experienced any pitfalls from your activism?
Oh wait, can I just finish one
Yes.
other thing, the previous question? I've had this discussion with Alex Gonza and a number of the writers, and when you have a global platform because of the accident of success of anything that you're involved with on this planet, I absolutely believe you have an obligation, A, to tell the truth, and B, it is my campaign continuously and my sincerest hope to leave the world with possibilities, options that you can only offer, it seems these days, in a fictional, dramatic world instead of in the non-fictional world. And no matter where you live or what you do or who you meet, save one life, you save the world. Take a life, it's as though you've destroyed the entire world. Don't underestimate the power of your ability to touch one life that will become that life that will unlock world peace, cancer, lack of moral, ethical behavior on a global basis. Do not underestimate your power. You do not need to be rich or famous to change the world.
Well, you've taken me in a new direction, so I'll let you speak later if you want to about any pitfalls you ran into by being activists. But given Mandy's quote, I wonder if you would each talk about various points in your life and maybe some of the times when you were raising Isaac and Gideon, where your performance art, your activism has connected to your Judaism or your sense of spirituality, and how those have run together or not.
You know, I'm a Southern California Jew, and Mandy's mother was very happy that he was marrying a Jewish girl until she found out what kind I was. For me, literally, being Jewish meant Passover, Rosh Hashanah with the family, those two events, Hanukkah, of course, and healing the world, making the world better. It meant if you were a Jew, you couldn't be a prejudiced person of any kind toward anybody, and it meant social activism and protest. So that was my definition of being Jewish. Mandy, as he told you, grew up in, Temple Road, Phi. So we had to work pretty hard at coming to a mutual understanding of how to raise these boys. My brothers didn't have a bar mitzvah, both our sons did, but I wanted it to be very meaningful. So when I put their books together of all these things, of Jewish ideas and things from Martin Luther King and from their passages that made sense, and I made this book, and right before I went to get it mimeographed at the time, I checked in with the rabbi and I said, so how is this? Is this right? He said, yeah, other than all the Hebrews upside down. I think my kids, our older son keeps Shabbat. I mean, we had Friday night dinner, but we didn't, not answer the phone. And he continually tells us when we call and say, honey, we've been calling you all Friday. He says it's Friday. Remember Friday to Saturday now? He likes the connection with his Judaism. It's also the only way people will let him be offline. If it's a religious, so it's double. So they have a very strong sense of their Jewishness, of the stories we've told about their great-grandparents that were Russian refugees. And to me, I love that tikkun olam. I mean, it's a really genuinely moving thing. And I think they connect that, to heal the world. They take it very seriously. Both in the personal, when our children have to remind both of us to shush up and listen a little more. We've learned that from them. But both personally and in the macro aspect of how to behave as a decent person. We call it practicing being human, which I always tell new parents, that's the hardest thing that you have right now. I just had to worry about the mortal blood code in a video game. Now, the whole world is turning into a machine, and I really think you have to practice values like empathy and compassion and connecting. Not this, but this. Did that answer that question at all?
Yes.
Oh, good.
And I don't know if the coffee company is still going, but what I remember about Isaac's coffee company was that it combined Jews, Christians, and Muslims in Uganda to produce coffee that was being sold in New York.
Yeah. My son is much better at practicing. He says at a Pentecostal church we recently were asked to speak at after the Charlottesville, he said to everyone there, I deeply believe we have to look at our common humanity and past what divides us. And he really practices that. I can act as though I'm looking at our common humanity with some political people on certain sides of the spectrum, but I'm really just waiting to show them the light,
People, when I would do interviews with Jewish magazines or newspapers, ask me what it is to be a Jew, and or the roles I play, and what's the Jewish connection. So in Rabbi Ralph Simon's sermons, I remember as a little boy, if I had to define Judaism, it had to do with Rahmanas, compassion, and forgiveness. As an adult, I no longer believe in forgiveness. I believe that we're human beings, and human beings make mistakes, and it's okay. And if you can forgive yourself, that's a pretty tough game right there. But forgiveness is no longer my goal. Living and doing the best I can is my goal. Moving on is my goal. Being empathetic and compassionate to my fellow human beings all over the world is my goal. But I'm no longer going to spend the rest of my life beating myself up for mistakes I've made and destroying precious moments with my own Jewish guilt that various religions and cultures have. The people would say to me over the years, somebody asked me questions about the roles I played. And I realized, whether it was George Seurat in Sunday in the Park, or Che Guevara in Evita, or Inigo Montoya, or Saul Berenson, I realized they were all Jewish. Because I'm Jewish. And that's the only way I know my way into the world. As that little boy who sat in synagogue at 7 years old and went into the boys' choir waiting to sing Shalom every Shabbos before my dad took me to Comiskey Park afterwards. I would watch the old men shuffle and pray, and I'd hear the music and I'd hear the cry in their voice. And it's a cry that I've heard the rest of my life wherever I've gone. And my connection to Joe Papp was profound because I lost my dad when I was 18. And so Joe became a deeply precious father figure to me. And our connection had nothing to do with the theater, even though that's where we met and worked tirelessly at. It was our Judaism that we had in common, and our need at a certain point to run away from it, and then our need to come back to it. And it was Joe who came over for a Shabbos dinner one night, and I played him a song that I'd recorded in Yiddish. And it was Joe who said, "You need to learn this music. You have been given the ability to sing, and it is your job to learn these songs and to get at the end of the line and carry it forward." And he gets that credit. And so we would sit at the dinner table with the kids, and we would start to just go, start singing the Nigun. And that was our connection.
I love what Joe said also. Mandy, as he said when we first met, he said, "I'm not political." And we got on a bus, and he saw a very elderly woman, running to catch the bus. She was probably younger than I am now, but it seemed like she was very elderly at the time. And he told the bus driver, "Please stop, there's somebody running to catch the bus." And the driver didn't listen, so he pulled the emergency cord. And I just looked, as the woman got on the bus, I just looked at him and said, "That's political." And Joe, when Joe was one of the first people I told I was marrying Mandy, I went into his office and I said, "I have something to tell you. I'm marrying Mandy." And he said, "You're marrying a real radical, And I don't think I did know. Totally in the huge scope of how Joe meant it, and he saw the complexity of this man that I loved even before I knew how complex he was. So I always loved Joe for that.
There was an amazing moment we had at Or Sameach Yeshiva in Israel, where I was studying to prepare for filming the movie Yentl. I was sharing this downstairs with some folks, a part of it, and they were first of all trying to get me to stop the movie from being made. They found...
We didn't know that when they invited us for a Friday night.
No, we didn't know for a Friday night dinner, but that was clearly the intent. And the other extraordinary aspect of the evening that I'll never forget was it was clear that the women weren't speaking at the Orthodox table. And that wasn't going to work for my wife. And so I just remembered, I don't know why I brought that up, but...
I didn't realize I was the only female speaking. They were all serving and the young yeshiva boys were talking, but I was joining in.
But I did, I said, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, honey.
Are you sure it's okay?
I was debating about the hand and the bird story.
Oh, go ahead, you want help?
Well, this rabbi at this table.
I mean, I remember now why I brought it up, because I wanted, what I was thinking earlier, what I was thinking earlier is how the women in my family have taught the 3 boys, and I'm one of them, how to live and who to be. And part of it was, you know, was triggered by that. Go ahead.
We got invited to this Shabbos, and I thought it would be so interesting to go to Meir Shavim. How do I say it?
It was in Meir Shavim, yeah.
To see a real, you know, Orthodox Shabbat. I had no idea what I was in for. One, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to talk, so I offended everybody by talking quite a bit. And then the rabbi that had invited us said to me, "Are you going to allow your husband to study?" And I said, "I'm sorry, you don't understand our relationship. I don't allow or not allow him anything." He said, "Well, you know what the king said to the Jew, don't you?" And of course, no, I had no idea. And he said, a king captured a Jew, and he said to the Jew, "Give me the right answer." And with that, he caught a bird. And he asked the Jewish man, "Is the bird alive or dead?" And the Jewish man said to the king, "Well, if I tell you he's alive, you'll kill it. If I tell you he's dead, you'll let it fly away. Therefore, the answer lies in your hands, whether you will allow your husband to study or not." That was the beginning of our captured night at Meir Shavim.
But you know what I'm reminded of about that night? Because the days before, while I was studying there, I met a rabbi named Rabbi Gershenson, who was a world-renowned expert in gematria. And it so became crystal clear to me. I was really hooked with this guy. I got addicted to him immediately, who could take any number, letter, or current event, or past event in history and relate it to the entire timeline of the world. He was simply the greatest storyteller I had ever witnessed in my life. And at that moment, whatever your belief system is, it was clear to me that whoever wrote the Torah and the commentaries, etc., were equal to this rabbi. And it was also the world that I had trained to be a part of, which was the theater. And it made a kind of connection to me that it was okay if my temple was the theater as opposed to the synagogue, because I could never find a synagogue that spoke to me like Rapaport when I was a little boy, and the theater became my temple because Rabbi Gershenson was the most theatrical storyteller I'd ever known. And so, you know, when I make a joke, which it's not a joke, that all the roles I played, they're all Jewish, all the parts I play, even if I'm a Spaniard, it's because of that. You know, Rabbi Gershenson could take any letter, event, or number and just turn it into something like that bird that's ready to fly.
I want to move, before we run out of time, I want to move to some of your recent activism. I want to give you some space to talk about it. I thought before, when you were talking about being enriched by the people you meet, that even though you have jet lag from Uganda, you might be able to tell the story of Sita from Cambodia, the union organizer. But then I'd like each of you to talk about, given the complexity in the world today, the problems that are environmental and political and local and global and whatever, national, just how come the issue of immigrants and refugees has burned brighter and brighter since the first time we talked.
Sure.
So, and tell us about some of the people from Uganda as well.
I never thought I could go to Cambodia except on my knees in abject apology. I really didn't. So I'm so grateful when Ruth had asked us to go to that particular place. And it was, first of all, the people, you know, they're not interested in my apology, they're just interested in moving forward. And all the groups that AJWS supports there are going to make that help make that a democratic place one day. But we met an extraordinary young woman named Sita, who's a garment worker organizer. My grandfather, who came from Russia in 1904, started Moto Day garment industry. So there was that connection. She's brave, she's brilliant, she's funny, and we've stayed in touch. And we had a gathering for her, was it a year ago? I think it was a year ago in March, where she came here. And, you know, it's
And a fundraiser to
and a
eradicate the
fundraiser.
ordinances that are still blowing up children all over the...
Well, that's Legacies of War, honey, that's
Well, I
like...
got them confused, sorry.
That's okay.
It's okay.
We also met a
It's
great
in
person
Cambodia
from Laos.
also. In Cambodia also, it's fine.
We've met extraordinary people that we stay in touch with, and you know, when you mention all the complexities of this world, the selfish part of this work is I feel better and a little more hopeful and a little less depressed when I meet people like Sita, you know. And I meet people like this wonderful woman, Carol, that we met in Uganda, and Juan, who ran from bombs with her 4 children, who's interpreting and educating, and, you know, I just feel, well, there's, you know, it's the old, say one life, you say them all, the old fish story that we all know and we're raised with, you know.
Tell that story.
I'm sure every single person knows this story, the
tell it.
starfish story.
Somebody
Where
does
the
know.
little boy is with his father and all the starfish wash up, and he starts throwing them back into the sea, and his father says, "Why are you doing all this work? You can't possibly save all these starfish. What difference does it make?" And he says, "Makes a difference to this one." And, you know, this one sometimes being us, because it's made a difference to us, meeting somebody like Sita. And hopefully it'll make a difference. Somebody once said to me, my son once questioned why I was going to Sierra Leone with the group. And a very lovely man said, "Tell your son you have no idea of how powerful the act of witness is. That you take your time out from your life to observe somebody, a stranger's life, to look them in the eye and say, it is important for me to see you and hear you. You have no idea how powerful that is, and you have no idea what the impact of these journeys will have on your life, how it will change you." And I found both those things to be really powerful.
I was shooting the 5, 6, 7, I think the 5th season of Homeland. We were in Berlin for 6 or 7 months. The first episode of that season took place in a Syrian refugee camp. At the same moment, 125,000 refugees were fleeing Syria, trying to make their way through the Balkan route, many hoping to get to Germany. I'm locked in a fictional world, as I have been for 7 years, in the current event world that we've all been living in. As we know, we try desperately to get away from the news and what's going on every single moment of every day. My job is quite interesting. I listen to the news and watch it like the rest of us do. I then have to memorize it, the aspect that the writers have written, and then I spend 15 to 16 hours a day for 7 months reenacting it, but hopefully with a poetic possibility to make the world a better place. But I was torn to hell living in this fictional world at that moment, because the moment I saw the photos that we all saw of those refugees, I saw my family. I saw my Grandpa Max and Grandma Celia leaving Eastern Europe, fleeing the pogroms, and the rest of the relatives being luckily brought over. And I saw those children, and I saw my own 2 sons, and I saw my wife's face and my face when we were young. And I wanted to simply get finished filming, get over there as fast as I could, hold their hands, give them water, and any kind of comfort I could imagine. I read something in the New York Times about the refugees in Greece and Lesbos, and I immediately called one of my mentors, Ruth, and I said, "I want to go to Greece, how do I go about it?" And I said at that time, I want to go just as a regular Joe, not as a celebrity. I just want to be with these people. That's all I want to do. And she said, call Sandy Borgman at the International Rescue Committee. And I did, and they arranged the trip. And I said to Sandy, listen, I just want to go as a citizen, not as a celebrity. So I said, I understand the quid pro quo of things, but is that okay with you? She said, yeah. I said, so if you want to take pictures or something, I said, if we could just hold them off and figure out what to do later. And I want my sons to come. So I called Isaac and Gideon. And I said, I'm going to go make this trip the day after I finish, literally the next day when I wrap Homeland. I'm going to get on the next plane with the International Rescue Committee to Lesbos. Would you guys come? And I immediately said, but they both at different times had issues about celebrity and all that stuff. And I said, it's not a celebrity thing. It's just me going and my sons. They said, Dad, we would love to go. We really would. But we're busy, both of them were busy. And they said the exact same thing on separate phone calls, so they didn't hear what the other said. They said, but Dad, if there was ever a moment to use your celebrity, this was it. Let them take any photograph they want or video. Give them every ounce of your being. This is it. So our children are our teachers at the end of the day. And the privilege that I never imagined would come from being in the entertainment business in a fictional television show that got lucky and became successful globally, and by that gave me a global platform to be the voice for those who have no voice, is a privilege that I never imagined in my whole life I would hold in my hands and my heart and be able to share with my family and the world at large. And the trips that we have made have been so extraordinary when we meet these individuals who are our families. Every one of us in this room and listening, anywhere that this streaming business goes, wouldn't be where we're sitting if people in the United States of America hadn't welcomed our ancestors. And in most countries, the same case. And I could go on and on about the excuses people use for being frightened about terrorists and vetting, and those are political excuses. And I just want to lay out one fact about that I have studied it like a PhD course because of my connections with members of the of the intelligence community internationally and members of the International Rescue Committee. Not a single terrorist incident has taken place by a refugee in the United States since 1970. The vetting process in the United States is known as the gold standard of vetting around the world. It doesn't mean that it can't be improved, but it's the finest that there is. It's a 2-year process only after you go into one of the 9 systems around the world that the UNHCR has that meets you as an individual or a family and decides that you can even begin the 2-year vetting process, and then it's a process that never ends for the rest of your life. So that the refugees who come to our country, the United States of America, are some of our most precious, secure, safe, trusted individuals anywhere on the planet. And when you meet 10-year-old Farad Nouri, a little Afghan boy who's an artist of extraordinary gifts, and I said, Farad, I'm going to take our conversation and share it with people all over the world. What do you want them to know? He said, I want them to know that I ask them to be kind to refugees. Not just me, but refugees everywhere. And we hear that kind of story over and over again. And when you are with these people, these Ugandan people that we just met, and you witness the Ugandan government's generosity to these vulnerable human beings, your heart stops. The elders have given their land free of charge without asking the government anything in return. Every refugee who comes gets a plot of land and a starter kit to build their home. The schools that are built, 37 in one in Bidi, it's a 290,000 refugee settlement camp. Another one we went to was in Vepi, 130,000. One woman that we met, Lillian Dawa, who has whose husband was tied to a tree and shot in the chest in front of her. A bomb went off and her 6-year-old little boy, Harmony, disappeared. She made it across the South Sudanese border to Uganda. She got reunited with her son because another woman found him and was in a camp nearby. And then she built her home with her own hands, and she's ready to have another baby any minute now. The strength of these women, the women's centers, gender-based violence issues that these refugees themselves learned to counsel women, because Lillian, before she had to meet this conflict, she was a therapist or a social worker in South Sudan. And the health centers that they create for women, the midwives that we met, they're on duty 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Since October of 2016, they've delivered 1,400 babies. Everyone fine, mom and baby.
In a tent.
In a tent that needs more resources. So I ask everyone to reach deeper into their pockets to find ways to support a developing country who is doing more than our country is, or the UK, or a number of countries in the EU. Instead of building walls, they are building welcome. They say welcome wherever you go. And I have to say something else to anyone who's listening wherever I go, because people say, well, okay, so I'll make a check. Yeah, make a check, it helps. But also vote. And find out who your representative is in your neighborhood, your district, your city, your state, that can make a difference. And if you don't know that person, find the people in your lives that do. And ask them, and then have an event at your house and support them. Because it is up to the elected officials of governments all over the world and the governments to do what they've been elected for. If you wanted to run for public office to make a change for the human beings in your community or the global community, then engage your imaginations and come up with some options to help these people, because the refugee crisis that we are descendants of, that we have the privilege of sitting here talking and gathering today in the building that my wife and I got to be married in, wouldn't be here without the generosity and the moral, ethical standard of the country we know and the global community we expect to behave in a moral, ethical fashion. So find out who those people are and hold them to the test and support them and make a change in our world. Because the refugee crisis isn't going away. It'll be here from conflict, from climate change, or something else. And that is our job as human beings.
I just wanted to add one quick thing. You don't need to go to a foreign place to be involved with refugees. There are refugees that have made it here, that need support, and it's not often easy, but it's really moving and interesting. There's a family in New Jersey, there's 6 kids that we met. He was a lawyer in Aleppo, and I took their kids to a poetry slam, of all things. You can find people that have that connection. I mean, I really looked at them and was overwhelmed because I saw my grandma Masha and Yasha sitting there. And they're right there in New Jersey, and they'd love to be invited for a meal.
Now, honey, I want you to tell everybody about Women for Change that you got involved in, so that don't sit around and boo-hoo about what's on the news. There are things you can do, and this is the story my wife's involved.
Well, Downtown Women for Change started November 9th, 2017, was it? Yeah? Well, no, 16. Yeah. 9 depressed women with a lot of ice cream downtown, and we're now 600 women. You can find it online, Downtown Women for Change. And it's basically, we have a postcard to Albany thing about healthcare and about which political parties are ethical and which aren't. We have been supporting people for school councils. We are looking at elections all over the country that need support. We've gone on all the marches together, educating ourselves about Board of Elections. it's a very powerful feeling to, our son came back from Ecuador once with a great phrase. Sounds better in Spanish, which I can't do, which is, there's nothing so bad that good can't come from it. And the resilience and the determination and the education that has been going on since the last election is pretty profound, and there's a lot of ways where you can meet very good people doing very good work.
Kathryn was sitting with Lillian Dow in her home at the at Bitty Bitty settlement, and in her little thatched roof house that she built with her own hands. And Lillian is working with women to empower them and teach them to teach their men that the men can carry the water on their head, the men can carry the wood on their head, the men can walk 2 hours in the morning to eat.
Or plant vegetables.
Or take the kids to school and pick them up 2 hours later. And then Kathryn said to Lillian, you get it right, but if the women were...
I just said it's time for women to run the world, give us a chance.
And Lillian said amen.
Amen.
We're going to go to the audience and the live stream audience for questions in a minute or two. I have to say, listening to you talk about refugees and what people need to understand, is there any way to take what you were talking about before with taking a mom's life, I know there's no Joe Papp anymore, but getting it on stage, could we get some stories about refugees and who they really are and what they're coming to, and get them on the stage where then you can make that speech afterwards?
Yes, at World Refugee Day last year, Kathryn and I went. 20th Century Fox, a company that produces Homeland, asked us to come out, did a matching fund thing with all the employees of 20th Century Fox, made an extraordinary donation to the International Rescue Committee, and we spent time with the head of the entertainment division, who also is the head of Fox News. And, so just put it all together, folks. And we spent time with the head of the television industry and the head of the film industry, and just the three of us in a room together for the whole day, talking about creating opportunities to show these people's lives. All of the people that are others. They've done extraordinary work in the entertainment field in terms of understanding the gay community and making them part of our lives and our hearts. And they have other work to do in other areas of life, and you need a lot of it all the time. Just like any little kid who you read a story to at night at bedtime, they want to hear it over and over and over again.
And listen, I was in South Africa, it's a whole long story, another time, but I am working on a play with the two young South African theater makers from Khayelitsha and Lange Township. The New York Theater Workshop accepted our beginning of our play, and Bulelani Mabachana and Kolisa Kapakante came here, and that play, we worked on it at Dartmouth, of all places, last summer. That was culture shock. But it's about, do you see me? It's called An Unlikely Bunch of Characters, and we are. And it's about, do they see me and can I see them? And, yeah. And then, Ruth, I've just got to say, this is another question. I went to South Africa in 2014 with Mandy, and I was very despondent about the state of theater. I had been in a great play called Model Apartment, and I played a Holocaust survivor, but it was about psychic pain. It was about everything. Everybody said it was going to move, blah, blah. It was great, and it didn't. And with all the junk I've seen that has, I just thought, I made it up. I made it up that this art form is a connection with all these different people. And I went to South Africa thinking I had wasted 50 years of my life in the wrong profession, and I should have been the social worker my mother wanted me to be. And then I met these two young men, and I gave them a book called Actors Talk About Work that a friend had written. And Bulelani says to me, oh, Mama Kay, this book will help so much with my directing. All these different ways of working. And this person moved me so much. Did you know this Marion Seldes? And I started to cry. And he said, no, what did I do? What did I do? I say, you keep thanking me for seeing you as not a statistic or a demographic, but you don't get it. Here we are, we're not the same color, age, culture, religion, nothing. But we can't stop connecting over this theater thing. So I thank you for reminding me that I didn't make a mistake, and I didn't waste 50 years of my life in the wrong business. And I got that from a 28-year-old from Khayelitsha Township that's a theater maker.
We are going to take questions. The mic is over there with Tom. If you have a question, you line up over there and you lean in to the mic so that the live stream audience can hear. You indicate who your question is addressed to, and of course, you keep your questions brief and on topic.
But you have to, it's sort of like looking for the Apikoman, you have to address the question to someone in this room.
Yes, we hope so. And then I will know from Rabbi Julia Andelman if there are questions from the live stream audience. We'll do this for a while, and then we'll do a close. I do want to say, pursuant to Mandy's explanation before about the challenge of the immigrant and refugee needs in this world, I don't interrupt these two people very often, but I just want you to know there are 63 million people in the world who are immigrants or refugees, including the 700,000 dreamers in this country, who the Chancellor has been eloquent in trying to support. But this is a population that by many academics is actually described as the fourth world. And so there's an endless need to address the issues politically, socially, and in the ways, and theatrically.
Can I just add a little bit to that? When Obama left the administration the year before, 85,000, just under 85,000, 6 people under 85,000. The quota, presidential quota was 85,000. They did just under 6 people, 85,000. The next year, Obama raised it to 110,000. When this new administration came into power, they kicked it down to 50,000. With all the bans and the red tape and the difficulties that they've employed in terms of allowing refugees into this country, it is now April and less than 10,000 people have been admitted. They expect less than 23,000 by the end of 2018. That isn't even half of a quota that's been cut in half. And that's worldwide. That's not just one place of refugees. The richest country.
Since there are not questions at this minute, if there are, then go to the mic. I'm not going to guess. There are questions. Quick and to the point.
Quick and to the point. So, Kathryn, you were talking about bearing witness. Hello. We're talking about bearing witness.
Yeah.
And Mandy, you spoke about Farad. And I love that you talked about bringing the stories of these refugees here for a wider audience, but I am curious about what art you've seen being made in the places that you visited around the world, and is the art that they're making relevant to their narratives, and how are they creating art for themselves?
Can I start with that?
Yeah.
A very simple one. We walked into a room, I think it was Bidi Bidi, where there are 290,000 South Sudanese refugees. And as we approached, there were about 50 to 60 women who were meeting to talk about gender violence. But as we came toward the temporary UNHCR tent, we heard the drumming, and they were all singing and dancing. And then we walked in, and they saw the visitors that they were told were coming in, the singing, dancing stuff. And Kathryn turned around and said, "I feel so bad." We walk in the room, and they stop celebrating and dancing. And I quickly just shouted with the interpreter, "What?"
I said to them,
Yeah.
I feel so badly through the interpreter.
Through the interpreter. We feel so badly, and so we let the whole room know, and instantaneously, the drums started and the dancing started, and it was an art form of human joy and resilience and recovery in the spite of unspeakable violence that may no people understand or experience in this lifetime. But their ability to use the music of the art of drumming and dancing and celebration of life was extraordinary. That's in every culture, but to see it side by side with the suffering was just so profound. And I was talking to people before I came in the room. People say, "Why don't you go to Hawaii after filming Homeland? Why would you go to a refugee situation somewhere in the world?" Because that's where I learned to breathe. I have the privilege to go there, to be their voice, but they teach me how to live. You can't complain about anything when you're in those
Well,
places.
you can, but it makes you feel worse.
That's right. It is so inspirational, and we forget how privileged we are.
Jonathan, John,
This is John Adam Ross, by the way. He is an extraordinary theater maker. And he is doing a whole series that you should all know about. John Adam Ross, right there. I have not seen, often I go to these places and wonder if they have a theater tradition. They do in South Africa. And Willie Lonnie did a play about sexual trafficking with 2 men playing 19 characters. So I've seen that.
In Sierra Leone, the radio.
And in Sierra Leone, they helped prevent, Search for Common Ground was an organization that helped Burundi not become Rwanda with radio plays dealing with all the problems that were just embering on the ground in 6 different languages every day for 6 days a week. But I don't often see theater art form because it takes so bloody long to get something from an idea up that by the time that happens, it's past, which is why you should all come see newer theater because they take it from the headlines and it's very relevant. But there's not enough of it. And I'm very anxious to see your work and very excited because I think you're one of the few who does that.
And it's a great question and a perfect example of what people can figure out with ways and great organizations around the world, how to bring to some of these settlements art, music, theater, dance, engineering to make better permanent homes, because these refugee systems are no longer temporary. The walls have been shut down all over Europe. They're permanent. Minimum is usually 10 years. It could be a lifetime. And so, you know, this is where your creative spirits all over the world can really meld itself with necessity and need and the food that these people need to exist.
Hello, too tall for me. I have a question for Mr. Patinkin. So last year, in the theater community, there was a big controversy with the show that you were going to be in, and with regards to social justice and with race and the role of Pierre that you were going to take on. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on the social justice sense of you with race and, yeah, that wasn't very eloquent, but I'm curious what your thoughts were on if that was a step forward or a step backward for the theater community.
I think the singular most important thing to do at any given moment about any given issue is to listen to what the community is saying and to hear them and to respond morally and ethically in support of those who are the most vulnerable even at home. And to recognize that no matter how important something might have been or fun for you to do or whatever, sometimes you need to stand back and give the other person the stage because they've been marginalized, compromised, and treated unfairly in all kinds of pockets of life. And this needs to stop. Women, African American people, dreamers, gay people, everyone who is considered other. There should be no more other.
Hi, I have a question, perhaps for Ruth. You know, this month, the 50th anniversary of the death of Martin Luther King, we've seen an awful lot of images of King linking arms with rabbis, marching across bridges, getting beaten up. Certainly the Freedom Riders, half the people on those buses were Jews. And it was a kind of a zenith, a wonderful high point of Jewish activism. And then there was a period sort of famously symbolized by the rift between Meyer Kahane and Farrakhan and Crown Heights, when it appeared as if these two communities were tragically growing apart. And so I'm wondering what you think the current, if you can squint at the current state of Jewish activism. Obviously there's no shortage of it up on this dais, but generally, where are we?
Okay, it's a great question. It's also a long historical question, but as I look at what I've done and the people I've been privileged to work with, both in government and through American Jewish World Service, and now here at the JCC, I think that there is a huge commitment to social justice in the Jewish community. I don't think it's all in, quote unquote, the next generation. I think it pops up in those of us who are still around from Generation A, and in people who have kept that commitment, and in people who are rediscovering questions about their own privilege and their own power to make change. And I see some real energy and enthusiasm in younger people. And I'm convinced that organizing for social justice issues, whether they are local issues or global issues, is inherently Jewish and is a powerful way to reach young Jews who may not have all of the other obvious pathways as open to them as we might wish, but who, when they connect, as both Kathryn and Mandy did, but particularly as Kathryn talked about, her Judaism is rooted in social justice. When people, younger people in schools and colleges hear that that's a powerful and historical way to be Jewish, and that there are many avenues for that at JTS, in their congregations, in their communities, that move is on the rise. And let me say, I hope so. Because it is not only, it needs to be a Jewish commitment, it needs, as Mandy said, to be a human commitment, but it doesn't surprise me that people of faith, whether Muslim, Jewish, or Christian, are somewhat closer to the notion that they actually need to be there for the other, and that they need to do everything they can to save lives and heal the world. Other questions? Okay, we're about to, oh yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, these will be the last two
You
questions.
mentioned that all the roles you play are Jewish. In Homeland, you are obviously the Jewish character. In Homeland, all the other bad guys are defined. You're Iranians and you're Russians. The good guys, you are really the only, Saul Berenson is the really pretty much the only ethnically defined character, the Jew, on the show. I'm just wondering how it feels like playing that. How do you feel about playing that role? And how do you see it?
I think it's just an incredible privilege that I have this role. I don't think of it as a Jewish privilege, to be clear. I think of it as a moral, ethical human being privilege. To learn from this character that the writers have written. He has taught me, Saul. You can just ask my wife or my children. Listening was not at the top of my skill set, okay? The past 7 years playing Saul has improved that aspect of my nature immensely. Understanding a moral, ethical, human nature has been the driving force of both Saul's and Mandy's need to exist, so that he finds this sixth sense savant-like character in Carrie Matheson, who Saul believes when he's gone that she is the child that will carry on his desire to save humanity, sometimes at great cost, but at the end of the day, that she has a heart and soul that cares about humanity, like my children do, like so many of our children do. And playing this guy has been just a profound privilege to my life, and forgive me for repeating myself, but it's a strange thing sometimes, the accidents that take place in our life. The greatest gift of this role was not being in a hit TV show or playing Saul, or even learning how to listen, but becoming involved with the refugee crisis in IRC by accident, by just a moment of thought that I acted on. And one of the most precious aspects of my life right now is to be a voice for the voiceless.
This will be the last question.
I mentioned to my daughter today that as a Jew, and I look at what happened, we were talking about during the Second World War, and that the guilt that I feel that what's happening to the refugees, and it's always like, why didn't the world do something to save the Jews? I'm active in politics. I'm very involved. I live in California, but I'm involved in all the organizations, but I don't see any way. I'm frustrated because I don't see how this is going to end. The politicians, the resistance, all of the liberal groups, what are we doing to stop it? I see, maybe we can get rid of Trump, but the Senate won't do a heck of a lot of good, and I have an extreme frustration. And I'm asking you, what can we do beyond? I can't go to Uganda, but what are we doing to stop what is happening? And just getting rid of Trump, I'm not sure is the answer.
What's the Dr. Seuss book that we read to the kids, the little Kachoo, or the...
Because it wasn't Seuss, but it was because of...
Dr. Seuss.
Because of Can't Wait Kachoo.
No, the voice.
The
He
Lorax.
heard the little...
Oh, Horton Hears the Who.
Horton Hears the Who, and he heard that little tiny voice. And so, no matter how little your voice is, wherever you're from, just keep listening and responding and raising it. It may not happen in your lifetime, my lifetime, or our children's lifetime, or our grandchildren's lifetime, but we must continue to do the groundwork and never give up.
And it might not. Maybe the whole thing's going to tank, like the planet. But I just feel, at least we'll feel better going down on the good side, fighting for the good side.
And I love when you were changed in the Vita.
A final sentence from Mandy and from Kathryn each about what makes you most hopeful as you move forward with your art and your activism.
Oh, God, honey, I'm not used to this deferring to me first business. Whole new thing.
You didn't need to say that.
You know what? Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind, my sons give me hope, and all the friends they have. They're all good, caring, active, non-materialist, for the most part. Really good human beings. And it's interesting, I said to my son, I got very upset one day, and I said to my older son, I started weeping, and I apologized for not doing more for the world. I thought the world would be better in my 4 years of activism at college. I thought we'd save the planet and end wars, and I was apologizing to him for not doing more, and he just looked at me like, another weird moment for Mom. He said, Mom, I think there are incredible things happening. I see incredible things, the awareness of pollution, the awareness of, they are on our case all the time to compost in the apartment building. Take the scraps of the thing downstairs, especially when they're there. So that's what gives me hope, is all the young people I meet, I get encouraged by, and an African-American couple, as I was decrying the state of the world, and I didn't want to be white, and I didn't want to be American, and I was really ready to move who knows where. They had a baby, and they called me up and said, did you get our announcement? I said, no, not yet. They sent it to me. They had a baby. They named him Clay because it was a substance that was used by every people for practicality and for making beauty. And the last name they are taking is a family. The mother had had a dream that she was at a well and she was pulling up the bucket from the well, and instead of water, light spilled out. And they are the Lightwell family. And I thought, if this young African-American couple can be full of Lightwell, then, get it together, Kathryn,
I just want to thank everyone here who took the time out of their busy lives to come and listen to three people discuss ideas and thoughts about being human beings, humanitarians, alive. And everyone somewhere else listening on streaming for taking the time. And I ask you all to find the light in your lives, like we do with the Shabbos candles. Let it reflect into our eyes and bounce off into the world around us and make a difference. No act of kindness is too small. Don't ever get tired of it. Don't ever think it's worthless. it makes a huge difference to that one.
So I want, on behalf of all of us, in a minute, to thank these incredible speakers. I first want to thank, as Mandy did, thank all of you for coming and all of you who are watching on live stream. I want to thank Julie Engelman, the Director of Community Engagement, for overseeing this program. I want to thank Arnie Eisen and Alan Levine for JTS sponsoring this kind of work. I want to invite you all to participate in other JTS programs, including online courses and webinars. There's information outside. On behalf of everyone, I want to thank the entire Rapaport family for sponsoring these kinds of programs. And then with all of you, I want to ask for an extraordinary round of applause for two of our most